Alrighty, welcome to another episode of the One Last Cast podcast. My name is Jonathan, and as always, we have Merriel Solesky here. Say hi, Merriel.
Yo, how's it going, guys?
Just like the title says, it's not fall, kinda. We had like a week where it was real nice, and I know it for sure got the flounder moving, and now it looks like it's kind of we're back to like late summer, looking at some hot weather. It doesn't feel like fall.
No, it does not. It felt like it was coming there for a second, and kind of fooled us, right? Because
Yeah.
usually we get like a series of them, like back to back. We'll get one like mild one, then we get a decent one, and then we didn't get none of that. Guess each year is different.
Yeah, but I will still say that the fishing is pretty darn good. I don't know about you, but it's been pretty good. So, what are your
Nah,
thoughts on
man, I
that?
haven't been as good as for me as it is for you. I didn't catch a 27 plus inch trout, so.
We'll get to that in a second. But before we do, definitely want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Speaking of that 27-inch trout, looking for knock and tail lures, pick them up. They're real good. Swim on the fall, built-in rattle in the back. Favorite one of my favorite colors is I believe it's the white lightning. It's like a green chartreuse white. Um, and that's been my favorite, one of my go-tos. But of course, plum chartreuse is also my favorite that I have. Merrill, I know he's kind of partial to that root beer color. So if you're looking for them, they have it in three sizes. And just pick yourselves some up. Go to knockandtailors.com, find them there. Awesome soft plastics. Of course, also 4A printing. I just saw Aaron. He's on here. If you're looking for merch and stuff like that to get printed or done, he has some good stuff, such as like this custom buff that he made us from our old logo, which we have our new ones. I still need to make an order for some of the newer stuff. But yeah, reach out to Aaron at 4A Printing. He'll get you hooked up. Also, Dirty South Kayak Anglers. If you're looking for a Facebook group to talk fishing, kayaking up and down the Texas coast, search up DSKA or Dirty South Kayak Anglers on Facebook. Great group of guys and gals on there. And of course, Meryl's lovely wife, Brittany Solesky. If you're looking for real estate here in Houston, either residential or commercial, hit her up at 281-740-0498 and she'll get you hooked up. Or you can reach her at brittanysolesky@gmail.com. Also, wanted to give a shout out to our website. If you're looking for our content, all of our episodes, you can search up onelastcastpodcast.com. We have everything on there. Even, of course, some of our episodes that we have not published for whatever reason. Just some good stuff on there. So onelastcastpodcast.com. All right. So Merrill, just like you alluded, it's a good segue. Kind of leading it out. I was gonna build up to it.
No, I like to spill it all out right off the
Just
gate. But
yeah. So yeah, this past weekend, I went out, took my uncle and his dad. They haven't been fishing actually since the last time I took them fishing last year. So, and it was I really my goal was to get them on flounder because they love flounder fishing, and that required me to get I they haven't been kayak fishing before, and I wasn't. This wasn't going to be a kayak fishing trip, but I wanted to get them to some locations that they haven't been to before. So I plopped them into the tandem, the Hobie Outfitter, and I just basically just towed them to where I wanted to go. We got out there. It was basically like a shell reef ledge. It was kind of, whenever, even the tide was a little bit higher, hopped out, it's probably about knee deep. But then if you keep going out, it kind of drops steadily. And there's just a lot of structure and riprap around there. I've been in the past caught a lot of good flounder around this time. The only problem with it is unseasonably warm. So I wasn't really sure how that flounder bite was going to be, but I told them they should be here, so let's give it a shot. We got out there probably around like 5:30, and they're using some like live mullet. I was plugging around. I got some good blow ups right before the sun came up. None of them stuck, but some good blowups nonetheless. But once the sun came up and I could see, man, there was just mullet rafts of mullet and bait everywhere. They're just swimming around, looking all nervous, and I'm like, man, this is looking pretty prime right now. And I threw more top water, didn't get anything. My uncle and his dad hooked up on a couple of actually surprisingly big sand trout. Like they just yeah they're they're using like 2 3 inch mullet, and then they just these sand trout just hooked up, and I thought they were trout at first, but they were like 14-inch sand trout. So um and
So
but
Seawolf is not rocking with flounder right now, is what you're
yeah,
saying.
Seawolf's not rocking with flounder right now.
Okay, all
um
right.
no, but seriously, I know people are starting to catch them at Seawolf, so if you're looking for flounder, go ahead and go over there. um but we I wasn't getting more blow up, so I switched over plastic and I just started plugging away. I caught a couple, some really nice ones. I did get a 22. That's my first fish that got released. um and I caught a couple of keepers from the 16 to 18-inch range. And then um just I made a cast. I saw a raft of mullet. They kind of got I know they kind of got spooked and they split up into two schools, and I kind of casted like right where they parted at, and it literally hit the water, and it just thumped right away and set the hook. And I mean, it's like, this is a redfish. This is a redfish just dogging me, drag. And I'm like, okay, this is a redfish. That's cool that they're around, because I usually don't catch them. I know redfish are around, just never don't catch them that often there. And it was just dogging it. And I started trying to crank it in. Um, and that first jump when it came up was just like, oh shoot, the freaking trout, that excitement. Okay, I need to start playing it a little more because I don't want to rip the plastic out of his mouth. And it made a couple runs. And I think I was still trying to convince myself it was a redfish, like it wasn't a trout, but it got closer and I'm like, man, that's a trout. And he got that silver and that dark purple on top. Um, and finally got it in.
Did
And
he come up with the mouth open and just
oh
like
yeah, yeah, just like a couple feet from me, and I was trying to bring it in. I had my net out, and one hand on, and the other hand was on my rod, trying to bring it closer, and it did that final death kind of head shaking. That was just cool because that lure was in the corner of its mouth, but it was just the mouth is so big you could hardly see it, you
wow.
know. Um, and finally brought that beast up. And I remember also I also found out there's a hole in my net. So I have a
Not a
hole
good
about
thing.
yeah, it's like a hole about probably like about this big. I didn't realize it was in it. It's one of those G2 nets that I have, and like I scooped it up and it's sitting in there. I'm like, man, this is a giant shot. I need to walk back to my kayak because I left my phone back there and then get a picture. And I remember like picking it up, and the fish kind of started sliding through that hole, and then it stopped because
Oh.
the head was just so big. So I'm like, oh shoot. Yeah. um, and the net will come into play later. I did lose a couple fish. Like I was trying to string them, and they kind of just slithered through that hole. And I'm like, oh shoot, whatever. Um, but got back to the kayak. Put it on the boga. Went about 6.5 pounds on the check it stick. It went 27. It could have probably gone 27 and a half if you pinch the tail, but um, yeah, I just it was, especially with the release and just letting it go. It was beautiful to see kind of it, especially with the sun where it was kind of swimming away. Um,
Nice.
yeah, and it was just a good experience. Um, I'm going to call out my wife here. Uh, so I got home and told her about it. I was like, "Oh yeah, I caught a 27-inch trout. That's the biggest this year." And she's like, "Oh, that's not too hard to beat for especially how your year's going." And I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
man, come on."
Yeah, push you to do better, right?
I know,
Yeah.
but yeah. For this year, it's the biggest trout that I caught. Um, and of course, it's always good to see them around. I mean, we know that they're around, but it's good to see them around and swimming, and I it was a after that anything really could have happened on that trip, and I would have been fine with it. But uh, yeah, it ended up being a really good day. I think we ended up between my uncle and his dad and I, probably 7 or 8 trout. We were short by one, partially because we miscounted, but also we lost. So I lost so many trout, and they lost so many trout. Um,
They have slipped through that hole in the net, even the bigger
yeah.
ones. Like it could be like a little hole like this,
Oh yeah.
and a 20 inch will just slide right through that
Oh
sucker.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that slime really helps them out.
Oh
I've
yeah.
had
I
I had that issue where, and then I don't even know how you get the hole in your net, right? Like, how does that even happen
Yeah, it's
with
like
those
it's a
nets?
rubber material, and like I don't know how that happens to it. So
Yeah, and it's just like, man, you find out too late, and then you're like, you think like, oh, I'll just net it this way, but somehow they'll find their way through
of
that
course, yeah,
hole, and you lose more fish than
yeah.
you
I
should.
also had a very interesting experience with the some like my uncle and his dad were using live mullet, and after a while they kind of stopped going after flounder and they started just freelining the mullet because there's just trout around. And there's just I remember just looking over and I could see one of the mullet just swimming, and then this trout just comes up and just busts it like a freaking top water. Like it's just he wasn't paying attention. He's looking off and they kind of swimming this way. It's coming, and all of a sudden, it just you see this trout just come up and just annihilate it. And I was like, I think you got one on, and he's like starts reeling it up, and he's like, oh, I got one. Yeah,
You're right, I do got
yeah,
one.
I got one on,
After
and
it's
it,
done digested it and everything, the hook's like
yeah.
in the
Well, he ended
all
up
in the
losing
belly.
it, so
Oh, he did.
he ended up losing
Oh.
it. It looked like a really nice trap, but I don't know how big it was, but yeah, I ended up losing. But like it was a good experience. It was the first time that they were in a kayak, and my uncle was very surprised. This it was I have a 2016 outfitter. It's a tandem Hobie. No pedals. I just put the cassettes in so that the water wouldn't come up, and and like I said, just towed him to where I wanted to go to Wade. But he was very surprised with the the CT seats that they had in there. He said they're very comfortable, and it's surprising how, his version when he says kayak fishing, he's thinking like a little sit inside, like a sun dolphin. And he's like, this is actually pretty comfortable. Um, and it also helped that he didn't actually have to do any work. I just towed him over there. So
It's surprisingly how many times people like they'll go from a kayak like those sun dolphins or pelicans, and then they get into something like that's a little bit wider, bigger, more designed for people fishing and for bigger people. They're like, whoa, I didn't even know kayak fishing's like this. Like, I didn't know you had this much space, or it's not like, teetering or anything like that, because they always get a bad taste, and so they get into a decent kayak. But
yeah.
I'm glad he got into one, so he can probably change his mind about kayak fishing.
Yeah, he originally he had a boat. He had a what do you call it? A Carolina skiff, which it was a functional boat. Um, but maybe I can. I have a future convert on the horizon, getting into kayak fishing. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I also got a couple pair of Outbacks if he wants to try those out, and the 360. So let me know. We'll get him
Yeah,
into a good one. But yeah, that's awesome, man. So like, what kind of gear are you using? I mean, were you targeting trout, right? I know you said you were targeting flounder, right? And then
yeah,
did you switch something and was like, man, I want to see if there's trout here. And if you were hunting for big trout, do you change your game when it comes to your rod reel presentation? Did you get a feeling there was trout here, and then that like naturally you do something a little bit different you would do for flounder?
yeah.
Or
Whenever I go fishing, I have in this case because my uncle and his dad were with me. I brought my live bait setup. Um, I should say my live bait tackle box. So I had my gear set up with I had my gear set up with a Carolina rig, uh, like a half ounce or 3/4 ounce egg sinker. I don't forgot which one it was. Egg sinker, swivel, leader line, and kale hook. And I was just going to use mullet because that's what we were doing. But when I got out there and I just saw how much bait there was, or actually when I got out there and I heard how much bait there was because it was still dark, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna throw some top water out, just I'm here, and I got a couple of blow ups, and I'm like, okay, there's trout here for sure, and I've caught trout here in the past, so I know there's trout here. I'll let my uncle and his dad tackle the flounder part. If there's any flounder, they'll get them, um, and I'll just start going after trout. Um, and then as the sun came up and I wasn't getting more action really on top water, I just switched to soft plastic at that point, and I was just working it, and that's when I started getting strikes. In terms of like my setup, yeah, I didn't do anything like I know if I was fishing like a flounder tournament, I have a couple of like specific flounder rods that I would use that are like they're they're 7 and like medium heavy, um, because I really want that extra backbone to dig into that jaw, those really tough jaws of those flounder. But in this case, 99% of the time, I basically do. Um, I use like the Waterloo Phantom or the Salinity. The Salinity is not a good choice for flounder because it's a medium light basically. Really whippy, a lot of give on the whenever you do the hook set. But the Phantom it's a pretty good all around choice. The 7 foot medium with the fast action tip. Uh, it it to me it's a good all around rod to do whatever you need to do. Um, redfish, trout, flounder, kind of the gambit for all those three. So um, yeah. So and in terms of the reel, nothing special either. Using I think I'm using right now. I'm cycling through my reels and I'm on a 200 Casita, the Shimano Casita. Uh, it's a workhorse reel. It's cheap, so it gets the job done. Um, I believe the it's like 7-1, so it's pretty fast, or 6-1 gear ratio. So it's like I said, it's just a good all around. If I need to slow down, I can slow down. If I can speed up, I can speed up. So
So you're not. So like, would you use mono or like if say I'm just saying like if I wanted to target big trout, right? Would I use mono, fluoro, a certain size reel with a certain bait presentation? Like I'll give you an example. Like for me, if I know I'm targeting big trout and I'm throwing a fat boy, I want a slower retrieval reel, something where I get like something like 6-1, right? And then I started liking the longer rods, like the 7.6s, the 7.7s, or 7 foot or above, right? 7.6 to about 7 foot is the rods that I like to use because I noticed that when I'm using the longer rods, that they fight the rod fights the fish more than me versus fighting them on the reel, right? So what I mean by fighting them on the reel is like I'm bending the rod down or I'm working the reel kind of in the favor of the fish. So, you know, if I'm hooking them, setting the hook right, and then the drag's either loose or tight. You got to know what you're doing, how you're throwing it. Some people just set the drag at one position, and that's it. Some people, when it gets closer to them, they lower the drag down so they don't try to hurry up and muscle the trout in, and then they lose the fish because they. And the reason you don't want to do that is because they got real paper mouths.
yeah,
So me, wintertime, if I'm winter fishing, definitely lower gear ratio, throwing a fat boy. I like to work that fat boy. If it's like this time of year, I'm actually still throwing a fat boy, uh, but I have like maybe like a 7-1 gear ratio. And still like the longer rods. I like the rod to fight the fish more than I do at my hands. Um, and I like to use mono because mono has a little bit of stretch in it, so that little stretch helps out when they hit that lure hard, like they just thump it, boom, and when they thump it that hard, it gives it that little stretch, that little give. So when I'm fighting them, the hooks are not so hard on their mouth that they can just rip out the hooks when they're shaking their heads and they're moving around. Versus a fluoro, I'd use fluorocarbon if I'm hunting redfish or if I'm fishing around structure that I know I'm going to need that extra abrasion, or I'm fishing for flounders, right? Like flounders. flounder. So
Yeah,
like I'm setting the hook, there's no give on that fluoro. It's like boom, I'm ripping through that skeletal structure on his face on a flounder. The bad thing about, also make sure you got sharp hooks, right? Because sometimes you get that hook stuck in their plate, that flounder ain't going nowhere,
yeah,
because it's there. So that's kind of an example. I don't know if that
yeah.
helped.
So yeah, I like my setups that I have. They're designed for all around fishing. They're not really in the case here. It's I wasn't really specifically targeting trout. It was just my general setup is I want to be able to do everything if I want to do it. Throw top waters with it, throw fat boys, throw plastics. They're not really well designed for any of these applications, but they work well enough for all those applications. Um, and for me, it's more about, and I think I know you agree with this too. It's more about like your locate, where you're at than like what you're throwing. Um, I rather put myself into position to you know, catch a big trout than to make sure I'm outfitted correctly for a big trout if it comes around. So to me, it's kind of the other way around. Um, where I'm at is I wouldn't say it's like one of my top spots for a big trout, but I will say that from my experience fishing the area that I was at, with the all that combination of structure and how the depth goes and kind of the bait that I know that's in the area, I know if I were to sit there all day, I would probably have a shot at a big trout, something like a 5+ pounder, if I were to sit there all day and just work at it, which I can't say for a lot of places, so I guess in a sense that's good, but like I said, I rather put myself in the position to catch it than to like I'm going to be throwing fat boys all day, but I'm throwing them in on the Texas City Channel, that which you're not going to do well doing that. So, um, so yeah, it's I did have because again I was kind of planning on the flounder setup. I did have um, a fluoro leader, because that's just what I had, and I typically on occasion I do like to have some of that fluoro leader for that abrasion resistance. And of course, big trout they have sharp teeth too, so that's kind of helped.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So if I wanted to maybe hunt for big trout, right? This time of year, what's some tips that you can give people, or tricks, tips, or whatever, and how to target big trout? Because I mean, I feel like if I wanted a target trout this time of year, I know I would do a certain thing. Like an example is, I feel like right now they're kind of a little bit on the skinnier end, but they're going to start bulking up.
Yep.
So I'm looking for big guts that have shell reef structures close by. So those are two things that I'm looking for. Versus like in the wintertime, I'm just looking for these big old deep pockets that have shallow shelves close by. So it's a little bit different, right? These are a lot deeper versus a deeper channel, right? We're talking about pockets versus channels. So if I was hunting for big trout right now, that's kind of what I would look for, is reefs that are close by a nice good size gut or channel that runs, that fit where they can run back to, and then they come up to eat and feed, and they can go back into. It's kind of what I would be looking for big trout right now. What would you look for?
The short answer really is going to be an open area in front of a marsh drain. Um, Mainly because so right now, so with the way that kind of fall is working, you have all these or you're supposed to have all these cold fronts come through. The temperature lowers, and that basically kicks off a. I think the way it's supposed to happen is that a lot of the bait fish and shrimp they start moving out of those back marsh areas, those back lakes, and they start coming out, and that's what kicks off the fish feeding because they're like, there's a of easy it's an easy meal for these predator fish. And when you think about like Jack's Pocket over in Trinity, where that whole area is literally just a giant basin for all these marsh drains coming out, That area on a good day is just covered in birds because there's just so much, bait fish being destroyed by these, these predator fish, and the birds just having a field day. So it's something like that where there's a lot of backwater area, but you have that marsh drain coming out. So a lot of these big, these big flounder, big redfish, big trout, they're kind of hanging around these areas, and you kind of have to dissect it because the whole area is kind of good. You'll catch fish pretty much anywhere within that drain area, but there may be a section of it where it's better. Like you have that deep hole where the bigger fish is going to bully the smaller fish away and tell them, I'm going to sit here because I know this is a good spot and I can just sit here and eat and I'm bigger than all of you. So everybody's going to go away. Or you're going to find a little bit further away from it, that shell reef where, um, oh, that's the bigger trout or the redfish are going to sit around there and kind of wait and stage up and wait for some of the bait to move out. So you're looking for kind of all this combination of things, structure. Some of these marsh areas, they're in developed areas, with houses and stuff like that. I could remember, I know one, I'm imagining in my head where there's a couple of pilings to like, probably about 30 yards from the marsh entrance, and it's just some pilings right there. But those bigger fish will stack up right there and just kind of stay there and wait for when that outgoing tide comes around, and they'll either, I think they move from there over to the mouth and feed, or they kind of just know that the bait will come by there and it's easy pickings for them. So those are kind of the areas I'm looking, but the main common denominator is I'm looking at marsh drains just because right now that's what a lot of the fish are targeting and leaning towards.
Marsh streams that lead to a channel, or marsh streams that lead to a flat, or marsh streams. Just to narrow it down a little bit, well, I think that's a great idea. Like I've caught big. That's a really good point because I've caught big trout at marsh drains and mouths. But just to give the, you know, what a little bit more specific.
Yeah. Uh, I don't really have a specific, like, it's a flat back there or anything like that. To me, it needs to be like a lot of water. Like deeper water is usually pretty good because that there's more volume for them to go back in there. And of course, that's not to say too that sometimes these fish, especially redfish, of course, but like this trout, they will, if it's deeper in the marsh area, they'll just go up in there and they'll find areas to kind of stage up, and they'll come in and out. But to me, as long as there's a lot of water back there in the back of that marsh area, uh, I think it holds potential for, even if it's real shallow. It's like all of it back there, you can't even paddle it because it's shallow. As long as that there's water back there, that's enough for bait fish to go up in their hide. And whenever you have those fronts come out or the tides going out, and it forces all that stuff back there to come out, that's all you really need. So,
Yeah,
but
that's a good point. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
guess I guess one thing that you're trying to get at, and I'm thinking when I'm thinking about it, and I agree now, is not all marshes are made the same. So yeah, like my example, where just as long as there's water back there, but it's super flat, super shallow, not much really going on back there. Yeah, you're gonna catch fish, and that's no problem. But you may have a better chance of catching some of these bigger fish if you have some of those deeper guts, or those back lakes, or there's some of those deep pockets in those back lakes where some of those bigger fish can go up in there, feed, hang out, and it kind of go up and down with the tides. So they're really just in the thick of the bait and just coming in and out. So
That reminds me of a story time though. So like it was me, Andreas, and Justin. We're out in Matagorda, um, and it's similar to what you were saying. And we caught a whole bunch of big trout. I think the biggest was a 29 and a half. Or, yeah, 29 and a
wow.
half. Smallest was like around 23. Um, but most of them were like in the 25, 26 range. Was that me and oh, no, I think it was me and Andreas that went that day. And we're in Matagorda, and it's got a whole bunch of marsh system, and it comes out to the drain part, the mouth of it. This is like beginning of winter, and we were working. the mouths of all these drains because all the mouths come out to the front end, and then it's just open bay, Matagorda. And so we were working that, and we just ran into a big school. So I always, and then the water was literally like 1 foot, maybe 2 feet deep where we were working a bait, like literally 2 feet of water, maybe foot and a half to 1 foot. And we were catching big trout in that shallow of water. So with that's a little bit different, right? Because you have all these marsh draining out to these mouths, and then it's just shallow before it hits the gut. But they were all up on the shallow end, and that was a good time. That was a good day. So that was a little bit different base system, different techniques, right? I guess for the base system in Galveston, I guess I would target it different than I would Matagorda, right? Obviously, you're going to have to adjust to where you're at, right? Um, adjust to where you're at and how you would target them and how you do your homework. Another thing was we knew that in this area that there was bait in the back and there was fish feeding in the back. I think we went there a couple of days prior and we're catching redfish and trout in the back areas, and they had some deep guts versus another marsh system or same marsh system, but a little bit to the left, there wasn't a lot of bait or a lot of fish. Or to the right, there wasn't a lot of bait. But in this little general area, there was kind of reasons why there was more bait in this one area. And then when we came back, when it started dumping out, we started targeting those fish there, and it just so happens there were big trout. Couple redfish in the mix, but so that's another thing I guess you'd key in is like if you had an opportunity to do a little bit of homework, you kind of want to find out where the bait's at in these back marshes and the fishes that were feeding. Or there's fish. If there's bait back there, most likely there's going to be fish back there, and you got to kind of know that the fish were feeding on those the fish that were back there in those back lakes and the back everything, they're going to make their way out of those marshes, and then they're going to probably stage at those front ends. So a little bit of homework if you had the opportunity to do that. And yeah, so not all, like you said, not all marshes are the same.
Yeah.
There's, and always if you have the opportunity to check for bait and fish feeding, that's definitely will help you out and plus in.
Yeah, and it makes sense too because you talk to any professional red fishermen for who do all these tournaments. If you tell them all marshes are the same, they'll laugh at you. So
If you tell them that all redfish will, well, I've heard, I don't know who I heard it from. They're like, oh man, all redfish. If you find a redfish, you just throw a bait in front of them and they'll eat. For us people that actually fish in the marsh, know better that that's not the case. I've literally hit fish in the head with lures before, bounced right on top of them, and they just coming right through me and just they wouldn't feed, and sometimes they eat and sometimes they don't, or
yeah,
sometimes you got to figure out what they would eat, but they don't. I don't know who said that you know redfish eat anything because that's not the case.
I mean, I may have said that at some point, but I know that's not true anymore. But I may have said that at some point.
I
I'll,
wasn't trying to call you out. I
no,
swear I heard it
I'll
from
admit it.
somebody
I'll
else.
admit it. So,
I swear I heard
um,
it from somebody else. But
uh,
anywho, go
yeah,
ahead.
but another thing, especially targeting these drains, you got to put yourself in a position to do well. A lot of times the easy thing for us is just to see that drain and just cast into it and come out. And 90% of the time, you'll do well doing that. It's just that 10% of the time that you're going to be out there and it's going to look prime. You have this outgoing tide, there's bait coming out, and there should be fish there, and for whatever reason, you're not catching them. Um, so to help you with that 10% is, I think part of it is positioning. So obviously, like I said, one of the you have a drain in front of you, water's coming out. You can sit in front of that drain and cast into it and come out. Like I said, that works most of the time. Another thing to look at is before you even get to that drain, start working the area in front of it, like side to the right, to the left, out in front of it, even up to like, depending on how big that drain is, 50, maybe even 100 yards away from that drain. Because if that current's coming out, wherever there's current from that drain, there may be fish further away from that drain. Instead of being in the drain, they're outside of it. Another thing too is sometimes it's not the best thing to come straight into it, coming from the side. Um, There's been a couple times where I got super frustrated because like I could with the drain flowing out, there's shrimp jumping out. You could smell trout, and I'm like, I'm just not catching them. Um, and for whatever reason they didn't like that bait just swimming out. So what ended up, and I did it by accident because I think I hooked up on a flounder, and that current was kind of ripping, so I kind of drifted away from it. And whenever I came back and set it up, I set up on the side of it, and I cast into the current, and the current drifted my bait out, and I started tap, set the hook, and I started catching trout, and trout after trout after trout, and occasionally there were some really really good trout doing that. But I wouldn't have figured it out because all I was doing was just casting into that, casting into the drain and just burning it out, trying to get some fish. So start further away from the drain, maybe go to the side, cast in that current. And another thing too is to pay attention to what the bait's doing. I know a couple of times whenever I was out there, and like I said, a lot of times when the bait's coming out, they're just coming out everywhere. You'll catch whatever. But sometimes you'll find that whenever the bait's coming out, they may hug a certain, they may just come out and go to the right, you know. And if they're doing that, probably the fish are going to be on the right somewhere, not in maybe underneath that school, maybe on the edge of it, but they'll be on the right. Um, and there's also pay attention to the water clarity as well. There's one time where I was fishing a drain and it was clean on the outside, but that water coming out of that drain, it was dirty, like just super super murky. And basically it was the fish were just in the clear water. They're just sitting in the clear water waiting for stuff to come out. So as long as you cast into that dirty water and came out, they just you could I saw not flounder, trout. Be like, I brought out the bait and you can see a flash, and the trout would just take a swipe at it. So there are certain things you kind of have, and it's kind of like intuitive when you're out there, but just keep in mind all that stuff whenever you're out there to be like, you know, you're always out there observing and learning. So just make sure to keep those the observation eyes out on the lookout for stuff like that.
Have you ever rolled up on a drain, right? You see a blow up and you're rolling up on a drain and then you spook a redfish and he ends up spooking them all. Like he just like busts up and he starts busting out and then start seeing all these mud boils or swirls everywhere. And like, man, I missed that fish. And you're not like as you're coming up to the mouth. I'm not saying get on top of the mouth, but you'll be way far away from the mouth coming up to the mouth, and that one redfish will run straight towards the mouth and spook all the redfish or trout or whatever. Has that ever
Yep.
happened to you?
No, because I work further away from their drain first before I get up there.
So
But
it's never happened.
it has happened. I got up onto a drain one time, and there was definitely some nervous like shad and bait kind of boiling right there. First cast hooked up onto like it was a 22-inch redfish, but that redfish just ran up and down everywhere, and it like just ran across, and all the bait would come up, and then all you would see like these big mud boils just jet off and jet off. So yeah, it kind of killed it, but it, it it happens, I guess.
Oh, we got Terrell McGuire that joined us. He was the one that gave us the tip on the top water on redfish out there in Port O'Connor. Appreciate you joining us, bud. Um,
Yeah, and I also see Holly and Matt. They,
yeah,
they they recently purchased a place out in Galveston, so they're living the good life out there with the canal in their backyard, and they've
So,
been
so I think they've been in Galveston for a while. They just,
yeah, they
yeah, I
have.
think they moved. Yeah, yeah. So they're definitely. I enjoy seeing their fish pictures. They always
Yeah.
have always puts a smile on my face when I see them posting fish pictures, catching some decent fish too. Um, Sometimes the background gives y'all away, Holly. Nah, no worries. But so if you're targeting big trout in the wintertime, let's just transition because we're getting close to the wintertime. Is there a transition period that it's difficult to catch trout or catch any fish between fall to winter, or is there a smooth transition? Like sometimes that there's a transition, I think in spring, right, to summer or somewhere
Yeah.
right there. That's a little bit difficult of a challenge on catching fish. Is that the same concept when we're going from fall to winter?
Yeah, as a professional, everything's real easy. So,
Yeah, right.
no, I know what you're talking about. So that transition between fall and winter. So you're going from all these fish are like gorging on on bait. Um, they're fattening up for the winter. Uh, Traditionally for me, whatever, and especially the good memories that I have of fishing during the fall, it's literally every single place where it looks like it should be fish, or will have fish, and you can fish it and you'll catch them. That's like on a really really good day for fall. Um, that transition though, part of it is you have to change your technique, your mindset. So now you're going from 50 to 60 degree weather, and now it's going down to 40, and the temperatures are dropping, and that first major shift. The first thing I remember is like you gotta slow down sometimes. Um, and that's not to say that's always the case, because like I know the first big front, first like major front where it drops the temperature for the water, um, it doesn't drop it that much, but it's enough where I'm still fishing the same way, and sometimes that's not conducive to catching trout, and especially big trout. Um, yeah, I know on Jay on our chat right here, which by the way, we try to go live every Tuesday. Our times are changing, so I don't know what time we're going to be doing moving forward. But you can join us
Every
live at,
Tuesday.
yeah. I'm sorry, every other Tuesday. I
Oh,
apologize.
okay.
Every other Tuesday.
Because I gotta
Um,
make arrangements.
yeah,
Gotta
same
stop
same.
fishing.
Yeah. But every other Tuesday, and you can join us live at facebook.com/one last gas podcast. We have a bunch of people on here, on the chat right now, and I'm glad you guys are here. But one of the things that Jay is saying is going from a quarter ounce, which like for me, that's my go-to, is a quarter ounce. That's my default. Going down to 1/8. That helps you slow down your retrieve a little bit. You mentioned earlier another thing is getting your reel to with the lower gear ratio. Basically, once December kind of rolls around, I start bringing out the Corrado E5s, the Chronarch E5s, just because I one of the best things for me that I like about those is that I can still fish quote unquote just as quickly. But it's even though I'm spinning, turning the crank the same, the lure is actually still going slower. So it doesn't. I don't actually have to do that, but if I wanted to, I can even go even slower if I needed to. Um, so another thing that I've seen. And I just said this in chat to Paul. He's asking what kind of profile lure are we using right now, and for me, I'm going small right now, and as it going to the winter, it goes larger. But then whenever gets real cold, I may actually downsize again to small and work my way back up to like the 5 inch knock and tail. I'll go down to like the 3.5 first, um, just because I think whenever it gets colder, those winter months, the water kind of gets cleaner too, and you kind of need to finesse them a little bit, especially during that transition period. And then the small lure profile will help do that. But that's just my experience. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but you know,
The downfall though of having a lower gear ratio is if that trout decides to thump your lure and starts running towards you, because then you're like going 100 miles an hour
yeah.
to try to keep up with that fish. That's the only downside I see with the lower gear ratio is keeping up with the fish. I think Austin asks a good question. What leader line test are you using for trout? I am using 25-pound mono for trout. Austin, what about you, Jonathan?
I'm using 20. Traditionally, it's fluoro for me, just because that's what I have. On occasion, if I remember, I'll bring mono because I want that little bit more stretch. But I just have spools of fluoro that I like. I will use 20 pound because my main line is either 20 or 30 pound braid, which is what I'm running. So I want something where the leader line will break off before my main line will. So um, and For the most part, and I've said this before too. For the most part, I'll use leader, but sometimes I'm lazy and I'll just go straight braid, and it's fine, I guess. I mean, I still catch fish, um, but I am more cognizant of like if I'm fishing West Bay during the winter, I'm like I kind of really want that fluoro or that mono just because it's just like stupid clear over there. Um, Whereas if I'm up in the Upper Bay of Galveston, Baytown, wherever, it's a little bit more dirty, and I can get away with just going straight braid. So
Yeah, sometimes you get real lazy as a fisherman, and you just like keep that one lure on, and you're like, man, I know I should switch out. You
yeah.
just keep throwing that one lure or straight braid. I've actually lost fish to using just straight braid. Sometimes I don't know if it's my hook set or the way I retrieve, but sometimes the line, if it's a loop knot, it'll get on the back end where the eye meets the hook part,
Mm.
and it'll slip on that back end, and I've lost fish that way, and I'm just left with the loop and no lure. Um, so a leader also helps with that issue. I think DOA shrimp was one of the ones that I lost a lot, was just straight braid, and I just started using leaders for the most part. Is there any specific footage you use, like a foot or 2 feet or 6 feet or rods? I know some people use a whole rod length of a leader line, like whatever, however it's long your rod is. That's how much leader they use.
Yeah, I
Is that
think the
something?
most the most I'll use is like 36 inches at the most. Mainly because number one, it gets real awkward if like you're using a rod length. Even if you have the best knot, it's just I don't like feeling that knot go through the eyelets. It's just if I feel it probably doesn't, but I in my mind I'm like I'm hurting the eyelets on the rod. Um, and also it kind of feels weird just because it's like a different material. So whenever you're throwing it and it goes from that fluoro, that mono leader, and then it goes to braid, then it just feels kind of weird. The other thing too is that I don't want it short enough where if I lose my lure, if it break off, rocks or structure or whatever, that I'm now left with 3 inches of leader material, and I'm like, that's nothing for me. So that's why like 30, 24, 36 inches or so, it gives you enough to, you can still sling it out. It doesn't go through the eyelets, but also if you break off on something, you have enough leader to tie on again. I remember, some of my leaders, they're probably like, they started that and I'll go until they're like 6, 7, 6 inches or 5 inches. And then finally like, okay, it's kind of a little bit difficult to tie a knot right here. I'm just going to, at that point, unless I'm in real clear water, I'm going straight braid. So
Yeah. So mine typically is 13 inches and 5/8. That's the sweet spot for me. No, I'm just kidding. The 5. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. Now, I mean, so I use a short leader, maybe a
yeah.
foot, foot and a half. Um, and I use a crazy Alberto knot. If that's the knot I like to use, is a crazy Alberto knot to the leader line. I know some people they use swivels. They like to throw swivels. I could see the advantage on that, for especially if you have a braid on the back end and a leader on the other end. What kind of knot are you using?
Just I don't know the name that I see come up is the fisherman's knot. I don't have any specific knots that I really tie. The only other one that I really use is the uni to uni. But that's usually just for between my braid to the fluoro or leader, whatever is I have. Those are really the two knots that I use. Um, I mean, I do.
Yeah, there's this quick simple knot. I think I've done at a seminar. I did one of those knots. I think I did also a video of it. That's the one where you grab both lines, you make a loop, you stick your finger in the loop, you twist it 3 times, you feed it through, and you just tighten it, and then you
Hmm,
just tighten both ends, and then you cut it, and then you use that. I've never snapped that line, but it wouldn't be ideal if you had micro guides,
yeah.
because that knot most likely will stop at the micro guide. So typically I only cast my leader. So if I have a foot or whatever, that's usually where I'm stopping and I'm whipping it out that way. So I use that a lot. That's to me, we've never figured out the name of that knot. if I was gonna call it a knot, it'd probably be a lazy man's knot or something because
Like
it's so quick and fast and easy. I'm pretty sure there's a name for it somewhere, but
Austin Matthews in the chat saying it's I think it's a surgeon's knot ish.
yeah.
So
So,
it
but
could
I
be
mean,
that.
yeah, it's something. Yeah. Anyways, but that kind of sidetracked me. So you like so if you had the opportunity to fish mono for trout, you would do mono, but you also use fluoro because you have a lot of fluoro. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just it's not only convenient, but that's what I have. So
What is your favorite lure right now to catch a big trout? Is it the one you just caught one on, or is there one that you like better, but you just caught that trout on that lure?
no, this year has been my favorite knot. Not my favorite lure. Um, Here I'll give you. So here's the three lures that I and there's a category. If I want to catch a big trout, like if I know I'm going to catch a big trout, I'd rather catch it on a top water because that's just fun. You know, the one I caught it on recently was on the knock and tail on a quarter ounce jig head. But this year, for if what I've been doing, um, I would probably catch it on like a mirrodine, a suspending twitch bait. This year has been real good. The mirrodine has been real good to me. Um, and actually, not even the mirrodine. It's even the mirrodine and then the hover shad, the Academy H2O hover shad, the fast sync one. With all these like kind of, we've had a lot of high water, had a lot of bull tides this year, whether from the moon or from the storms. A lot of these shallow, usually areas that are like shin deep are now like thigh deep. And working those areas over with a hover shad or a mirrodine has been tremendous, and I've gotten some real good trout this year doing that. And that would be my answer. Yeah, that's my answer to your question.
Nice. Have you ever thought about throwing like a Yozuri type bait, like maybe like a what would you call it, wake baits or maybe not wake
Yeah,
baits? What is it? Go ahead.
yeah. I'm not made of money like you are, so I just can't afford your service.
Way to take a stab at me. Jeez, right in the heart.
um, I
We got to go to the
so
clearance. Whatever's in the clearance section, Merrill, is what we're throwing.
yeah, exactly. Um, uh, but for wake baits, I've caught a couple on wake baits this year, but I know the hover shads that you're usually referring to. Those are the more suspending twitch bait types. And I don't have experience with those, so I don't know.
So I used to love throwing the Miradines, the bigger baits,
Yeah,
but I realized how much trouble I have with the hooks. And if they get in the most of the times, those hooks are on the outside of the child's mouth. But when they get inside their mouth, man, pulling those hooks out of their gills is not fun.
yeah,
So, like being a person that doesn't like to kill the fish that he catches unless he's eating them, I've kind of like changed my tactics on how to catch trout, right? So I kind of like single hooks. Like, what's the name? Aaron's saying something like the tsunami that's pre-rigged, something that's something that doesn't have as many hooks and big enough hooks that will, or hooks that will get in their gills and stuff like that to make them bleed a lot. But I do miss catching them on those kind of baits, the fat boys and stuff like that.
yeah.
I still gonna throw. I would still throw a fat boy no matter what. But that was one of the reasons I kind of got away from those Miradine lures and those other lures because when it was in their mouth, it was most likely a dead fish. Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, a
that's a
lot
good
of
point. Paul made a good point.
yeah.
Changing the trebles to single hooks, definitely.
It just
What were you
makes
gonna
it
say?
it makes it it makes it easier too, especially if you're in the kayak. Instead of a thrashing fish with six hooks going around, you have two hooks that you only have to worry about. Uh, Obviously, you can make the argument that six hooks is better than two, but it's
You would rather miss the fish and then have it somebody else have their luck with it than kill it,
I
for
know.
sure.
I know this is kind of contrary to what everything I just said, and everything that you said. But I've been getting advertised to hardcore recently about for bass lures, um, and I really want to try one of those like those glide baits for like trout, those big like 7-8 inch glide baits, and try
Oh,
to fish for
nice.
trout with those. I've done it before
I've
with like I think I've only caught like one fish on him, and it was like an 18-inch trout. But a few years ago, uh, Academy had their clearance on their freshwater section, and I bought like these 6-inch glide baits. Um, I forgot what they're called. They're like X glides or something like that.
mhm.
It's the H2O version. So there, and I went out to a spot where it's just like it's literally like I was fishing this shallow flat that drops into like 12 to 15 foot. So there's this really, really small ledge that I was really fishing. The water was super, super clear. And I was in the Revo at the time. So I was kind of like sitting on my knees and just casting out there. There's like no wind and I could see everything. And I just cast out there and I just slowly worked this glide bait back. And I could see one of the biggest trout I've ever seen just slowly follow behind it, look at it, and then turn away. And I'm like, oh my
Oh,
God.
he was
Oh man,
interested. So
yeah.
I've caught one. I've caught a 28 3/4 on a crankbait, on a bass crankbait.
Dang.
Um, and that was out there, the place called the Lagoon, right?
Hmm.
Lagoon. We call it the Lagoon. So I just threw it out there because somehow I left that lure, and we waited that area. I left it in my bag, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna throw it out there. Threw it out there, and then I wasn't having so much luck on the top side. So I used that crankbait and I popped it down, and I really popped it and tried to get it as far as down as I possibly can. And then one of the pops, it came up, and then I just boom felt this monster hit. And I was like, no freaking way. I caught that on a crankbait. Um, but yeah, so I've caught one on that, on a crankbait, and I've also caught one on a 6 cents lure.
Hmm.
That one
Oh,
hurt my
that's
feelings because
that's what's been advertised to me. It's 6 cents is advertising hardcore to me.
oh really? So here's
Yeah,
the bad thing about that is you have to change the hooks out to saltwater hooks because
of course.
that fish was like literally coming in the net and just one head shake, and it clearly broke two of the prongs on the treble hooks, like just snapped them. And I was like, man. And someone was telling me like, man, these hooks are kind of flimsy, man. Because bass, man, they're weak fish, man. They just you fight them for like 3 minutes, they're done. They just come in just lazy. But nah, this trout wasn't giving up. Like he was just fighting, fighting, fighting. I mean, I was like, geez, like this guy done yet? And he wouldn't quit. And as soon as he got to the net, it looked like he was floating up, and he had a little bit of energy in him, just enough to do one good head shake and broke those hooks. I don't even remember having my drag that high either, but yeah, I lost them. Change out the hooks on those lures for sure if you're targeting saltwater fish.
Oh yeah, but trying to get back out there and do it all again. Um, I think that for in terms of fishing, one of the better feelings that you can have is replicating what you've been doing.
Mhm.
Um,
For sure. Yeah.
because fishing is always there's always going to be an element of luck, and luck is like luck is just part of it. It's no denying that luck is always part of fishing. But I think if whenever you if you want to get better, it's about mitigating as much luck as you can, and putting as much skill into it as you can. And so like I really want to get back out there and try it again. Obviously, everybody be like, yeah, I want to catch a 27-inch trout. Yeah. But
Yes. So you get luckier the more times you go out there.
but I think also on a smaller scale, even like to me, it sucks sometimes when I go out there and just catch one fish. Because like, oh, I got lucky. And that wasn't because I did something right. It's just because I got lucky. Whereas I feel much better whenever I catch, 3, 4, 5 fish, where it's like, okay, I had something to do with it. It still could have been all luck, you know. That's completely true. But I feel like I did something, you know. Um, so in the case here, I'm thinking really heavily considering. I think this weekend's pretty going to be um it's going to be pretty the rain is going to be pretty bad, but I may make an attempt to go out there.
All right, man. Good luck. Yeah, I'm definitely getting out there this weekend. Yeah, for sure. I have to. Rain or snow, whatever happens, hail. I'm gonna
if it
be
was,
out there this weekend. I need it. I've
if it
been
was
doing a lot.
snowing, I'd be doing something completely
Yeah,
different. So
yeah. I
I'd be going for those big trout somewhere. So
so there is a video of me and Juan out there when it was snowing, and I had ice on my beard. We were out there catching fish out there. Also, me and a group of guys, we were out in Louisiana when it froze over. We had ice on our kayaks, and we hammered the redfish that day too. So that won't stop me for sure.
oh no,
Um,
every single time I've had ice on my kayak or my reel, it was an awesome day. So yeah,
yeah,
I went
go ahead.
I went out to my buddy. He was like, "Hey, I know it's gonna be cold tomorrow, but come on, I think the redfish are gonna be here." And this is when I had the Tarpon 160. And I'm like, "Man, are you sure? It's like it's gonna be like 29 degrees in the morning." He's like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. It'll be fine." And I remember getting to the launch over in Demijohn. We launched at Demijohn, um, and there was nobody out there. And I almost slipped on my butt trying to launch my kayak because the ramp was kind of was frozen over. And I'm looking at my kayak whenever I drop my kayak, and like a sheet of ice fell off from it. And I'm like, man, it's cold. It's like, no, they're out here. I'm like, okay. I got out there, and I didn't dress for it. Like this is really early on whenever I was fishing, um, and, and like I'm paddling, and I'm like, man, this is cold. And that sun came up, and the condensation and smoke from the water started coming up, and he's like, "Oh, look right there!" And there was just this massive pot of redfish just swimming down the marsh, and I've never
Nice,
seen that before. He's like, "Just cast into it, double hook up." We got these nice 26-inch trout, or not trout, redfish, and then of course the school scattered, and he's like, "Let's go further down." We went for a little, we went like 50 yards. Oh, there's like three of them right there. Cast over there, and I casted a little bit too far in front, and he just like, oh, he burned it back, cast right next to mine. He's like, don't do anything, wait. And they swam over, and he's like, okay, popped it up, both another double hook up. And it was
nice,
just an awesome day of just finding redfish. um and of course, like, there was another time where uh the the entire city of Houston was shut down because of that. We had freezing conditions, and at that time I lived over in League City, so I could be like, it's like 30 minutes to water. No freeze is gonna stop me. Got into the water, got to where I wanted to go, and I remember reeling in my line, and ice was forming at the little where the line comes in at, and but I didn't care because I was catching trout and reds. So yeah, it's whatever gets cold like that, count me in.
yep, yep. I do want to say something for if anybody has tournaments that are coming up, hit us up, hit up me or Jonathan. We want to send
Yeah,
a care package out to you guys and your tournaments. Maybe even try to fish some of them if we get to. I know
yeah, maybe.
956 just had one. Shout out to those guys. I wanted to give them a care package, but I guess I was a little too late on that one. I know there's one in Matagorda. There's a tournament coming up in Matagorda,
Yeah,
November 9th. If you have the opportunity to do it, I love those tournaments where it's a five fish stringer. Freaking love those tournaments. Those are the funnest. So check that out on Matagorda kayak fishing. They're doing something there. And if you have a tournament, Kyle, let me know. We got a care package for you guys, for you and your group. So hit us up. We got you.
yeah. So if you're looking for that tournament, it's called the Full House Fall Full
Yeah.
House Fishing Tournament. Uh, I don't know how you can find it. Let me get the link, and that way that people can find it. I'm gonna put it in chat. Um, I just don't like driving, so I'm probably not going to participate in that, even though it sounds like a really fun tournament.
It's literally
um,
like an hour and a half from you. It's not that far. Matagorda is not that far.
yeah,
Like 2
yeah,
hours
I
maybe.
know. Oh wait, what day is it?
No, I think the ninth.
Okay, well, that's my excuse. I'm not going to be here. So,
All right.
but yeah, I've been kind of following along with what they're doing, and I did save it as a potential tournament I was going to do, but it's a $100 entry, one to two man teams, and it's like you said, I believe it's a five fish stringer with yeah, with a five fish stringer, and I think it's going to be a good time. Sounds like a good little tournament to enter. Um, but yeah, if you have any tournaments, let us know. We'll be happy to kind of talk about it. That way, that people have more awareness. But also, I'm also looking for tournaments to do because the tournament slate's kind of empty right now, and I've been itching to do another one. So
Cool.
well, I know like we can kind of keep talking trout all day, but um, kind of our hour is up. Thanks for everybody for listening and tuning in. We really appreciate it. We wouldn't be doing this without y'all. And yeah, if you want to come to our website at onelastcastpodcast.com, it's a great resource. I'm trying to put an effort to do more blog articles on there, as well as post all of our episodes on there. And like I said, you can find some of our episodes that have not been published. Some of them is just because like the audio was pretty bad, but if you want to listen to it, it has good info on them. Some of it was just like, you know, they're short, or for whatever reason we just didn't put them up. Uh, yeah, you can find them on there. So again, onelastcastpodcast.com. Another shout out to our sponsors, 4A Printing. If you're looking for stuff to custom merch, such as towels or buffs or anything like that, Aaron will hook you up. Just search 4A Printing on Facebook and reach out to him. Also, Knock and Tail Lures. We were just talking about them. Looking for a soft plastic that swims on the fall with a built-in rattle in the tail. Go to knockandtaillures.com. You can find some awesome stuff on there. Uh, Also, Dirty South Kayak Anglers, if you're looking for fishing up and down the Texas coast, even freshwater as well. It's a great group of guys and gals to talk to. Search up Dirty South Kayak Anglers or DSKA on Facebook. And of course, Merrill's lovely wife, Brittany Solesky, looking for real estate, commercial, or residential here in Houston. Reach out to Brittany. You can reach her at brittanysolesky@gmail.com or at 281-740-0498. Merrill, I always put you on the spot. Do you have any last parting words that you want to hand out?
Jonathan actually caught that big trout on a pyramid weight and dead shrimp on the bottom. That's it.
I told you that in confidence. Um,
I was just teasing. I'm just teasing.
um, yeah, I think before we head off, I do want to say that uh, obviously with the weather getting cooler, or it's getting cooler at some point, it will get cooler. Now is a good time to start thinking about your, um, making sure all of your equipment works. Like if you have an inflatable life vest, make sure that that's working in proper order. Um, Making sure your cold weather gear is good. Uh, I need to um, do some re-waterproofing some of my jackets, so that's going to be something I'll be doing at some point. Um, and just making sure your equipment's in good working order, because whenever the water gets colder, you kind of margin for error for anything happening, especially if you're fishing those really, real cold waters. It kind of gets lower. So definitely want you to be safe. So right now, while it's still warm out, get everything ready. So whenever the time comes, you're ready to go.
All right. Take care, guys.
All right. You guys have a good one.